Okay, everyone. So what we're looking at today is different types of variables. Of course, we're talking about variables in terms of science. So variables are anything that you are doing or using that might influence the outcome of your experiment. So, for example, a variable could be a temperature. A variable could be the amount of water we're using. The temperature, the variable could be how many grams of a substance are we going to have in our chemical reaction? A variable is really anything that is part of your experiment or that could influence your experiment. So there are three main types. We have independent, we have dependent, and we have control. So there's three different types of variables that you're going to come across. So we're going to talk about each of these. Then we'll look at an example of identifying them, and then I'm going to have you try two different scenarios. So first of all, an independent variable is a factor that you are changing. So this is the one that you are actually trying to monitor usually, okay? So it's the one that you are altering or changing during the experiment. So for example, if I want to know how temperature is going to influence a substance, and I'm going to change at different temperatures. So I'm going to go from 10 degrees to 20 degrees. So because I'm changing the temperature, that's going to be my independent variable. So it's the thing that you're changing. The dependent variable is the thing or the factor that will change as a result of your independent variable. So let's say I wanted to see, let's do an example. I want to see how does the temperature of water influence how quickly salt dissolves. So we know salt dissolves in water. So I'm going to try it at 10 degrees and I'm going to try it at 30 degrees. So what I'm changing is the temperature of the water, and the factor that might change as a result of my temperature change is the ability of salt to dissolve. So typically this is the one that you are measuring in your experiment. So you're changing the temperature, but we're measuring how the salt is actually being dissolved. Okay, this will make more sense as you see more and more examples. So another way to think of it is the dependent variable. So when something is dependent, that means it relies on something else. So the dependent variable relies on the independent variable. So we're changing something and we're seeing how does that have an impact on this other thing or this other item. And then we have a control variable. So control variables are things that could affect your experiment. So it might have an effect, but you do not want it to have an effect. So it's something that has to stay the same throughout your whole experiment. So for example, you want to have a controlled environment. So when you do an experiment, you only want the dependent and independent variables to have an impact. You don't want anything else changing, or else it could interfere with your experiment. So for example, my example with the water and changing the temperature with salt, I want to make sure I'm keeping it consistent. So for example, I want to use the same type of salt. I'm not going to use two different brands of salt because I'm not going to know what's going to have an impact. Same thing for the type of water. I can't use tap water for one and then distilled pure water for the other. You want it to stay exactly the same. Even the amount of water. If I'm going to use 1 cup of water, I want to make sure I'm using 1 cup of water every single time. These are controlled variables. So they're things that we are going to monitor and make sure that we are keeping the same. Ooh, pardon me. All right, so then we have an example. Okay, so our example here. So suppose you were a dairy farmer and we wanted to increase the amount of milk produced per day by your cows. So the goal is we want more milk. We want the cows to make more milk for us. You want to test if different types of grass eaten will affect milk production. So what we're going to change is we're changing the cows are eating one type of grass, and then we're going to change the type of grass. And we're going to see how does it impact the amount of milk that they are producing. So the independent variable in this situation is the type of grass that we're giving cows. Remember, independent variables are what you are changing. So we're going to change the amount of grass that these cows are eating. So the type of grass given to the cows is our independent variable. Our dependent variable is what we are trying to monitor or what we're trying to measure. So in this case, the dependent variable is going to be the amount of milk, because we want to see, does the different grass give us a different amount of milk? All right, so our dependent variables is the volume of milk produced per day by the cows.